My husband's sister kept trying to control our family life, inserting herself into everything. But I finally stood my ground and reclaimed our home. From the very first day I met my husband's sister, something about her unsettled me. She smiled politely, nodded at everything I said, and laughed at the right moments. But there was this subtle, calculating glint in her eyes that made my stomach twist. At first, I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. I wanted to like her. I wanted the family to get along. But little things kept catching my attention. The way she casually commented on my outfit choices, as if she were critiquing a project rather than greeting a sister-in-law. The way she leaned slightly closer when I spoke, listening too intently, like she was storing every word for later. Even simple dinners felt like a minefield. She would sit there, perfectly poised, making offhand remarks that seemed innocent on the surface. "Oh, you probably don't know much about this yet. Or everyone has their own way of doing things, you'll see." I laughed nervously, trying to keep the conversation light, but inside I felt a creeping tension, a sense that every smile hid a judgment my husband didn't notice, or perhaps he chose not to. Whenever I mentioned feeling uneasy, he brushed it off, saying I was imagining things. I tried to believe him, but then came the moments I couldn't ignore. One evening, she rearranged items on the kitchen counter without asking, commenting, "I just thought it would look better this way." Another time, she suggested she knew the best bedtime routine for our child, even though we hadn't asked. Each instance was small, almost negligible on its own, but strung together, they formed a pattern that I started noticing how she subtly drew people's attention. At family gatherings, she positioned herself at the center of conversations, steering topics to highlight her opinions, her achievements, her insights. I tried to assert myself, but it felt like speaking against her was stepping into a storm. She didn't shout, she didn't make demands out loud, yet somehow, the room bent around her presence. By the end of the first week, I realized ignoring her wasn't an option. Something inside me whispered that this was just the beginning, that if I didn't set boundaries now, she would slowly infiltrate every aspect of our lives. I couldn't help but wonder how many others had fallen into her subtle traps, allowing their homes, their decisions, and even their relationships to be quietly steered by someone so seemingly harmless. That I spent that night lying awake, replaying every interaction in my head, questioning if I was overreacting or if the unease was real. And the truth was, I couldn't shake it. I knew I needed a plan, not just for my own peace of mind, but to protect my family from being quietly controlled by someone who clearly thought she knew better. The next morning, I tried to act normal, convincing myself that maybe I was just being overly cautious. But as soon as I walked into the living room, there she was, sitting cross-legged on the couch, scrolling through my husband's tablet. "I just wanted to check something," she said with that saccharine smile, but my gut twisted. I asked her to step aside, trying to keep my voice calm, but she lingered, commenting on my choices of apps, games, even photos on the screen. It was as if she was silently cataloging everything about our life. At tea brunch later that day, she managed to turn a casual conversation about weekend plans into a debate about the right way to organize family events. My husband nodded along with her, leaving me to feel like an outsider in my own home. I tried to interject, to voice my own opinions, but each time, she would counter gently, "Oh, I just think it could work better if we," and the room would subtly shift to her side. I started noticing a pattern. She never raised her voice, but she always found a way to insert herself, guiding the decisions without ever appearing controlling. That I began keeping mental notes, analyzing every interaction. The way she commented on the grocery list, the way she suggested rearranging our furniture for better flow, the way she subtly questioned my parenting choices, it was relentless. I felt a mix of frustration and disbelief. How could someone be so invasive yet so polite? Each little intrusion chipped away at my sense of autonomy, and I realized that if I didn't set firm boundaries, she would slowly encroach on every aspect of our life. By the end of the week, the tension was palpable. My husband remained blissfully unaware, laughing off my concerns with a casual, "You're overthinking it." But I wasn't overthinking it. Something deep inside me knew this was just the beginning of a long, subtle battle. I started imagining scenarios, her showing up uninvited during important family events, making decisions for us, slowly turning our home into her domain. I knew I had to act carefully, too aggressive, and I risked creating a rift in the family. Too passive, and she'd take over completely. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, going over every detail, every slight, every calculated smile she had given me. I had to figure out a way to protect our family, our home, and our peace without starting a war. And deep down, I understood one thing. This wasn't about one tiny incident or one awkward comment. This was about a long game, and I was just stepping onto the board to be why the second week, her subtle intrusions were becoming impossible to ignore. She started leaving little helpful notes around the house, reminders about meal times, suggestions for bedtime routines, even instructions for folding laundry in a more efficient way. At first, I tried to laugh them off, but each note felt like a tiny claim on our space, a gentle but persistent reminder that she thought she knew better than I did. The tension grew during a family dinner when she casually announced, "I already signed our child up for the art class I thought would be perfect." My husband blinked, surprised, and I felt my chest tighten. I asked her why she had made that decision without consulting us, trying to keep my voice steady, but she just smiled and said, "I thought you'd like the surprise." There was no malice in her tone, just a calm certainty that she was right. And the worst part? Everyone else seemed to nod along, treating it like a kind gesture that I started keeping a private journal, documenting every little overstep, every subtle manipulation, and every feeling of helplessness. It became a way to make sense of the chaos, a way to preserve my own sanity. I noted how she would linger in conversations, steering topics to highlight her knowledge, and how she would praise my husband for letting me handle things the right way. My husband never seemed to notice, or he chose not to notice, and I was left feeling like I was trapped in a game I didn't agree to play. One afternoon, she appeared at the front door unannounced with a basket of snacks for our child. "I thought you might be too busy," she said. I froze, unsure whether to thank her or assert boundaries. I chose the latter, gently explaining that we appreciated her thoughtfulness but preferred to plan our own schedules. She tilted her head, smiled faintly, and said, "Of course, I understand." But her eyes betrayed a small flash of challenge, as if silently noting that this battle had just begun. That night, I sat alone on the couch, feeling both exhausted and strangely determined. I replayed every interaction, every smile, every suggestion she had made. I realized that ignoring her wouldn't work, and reacting too aggressively could fracture the family. I needed a strategy, a careful plan to protect my family's autonomy without turning everyone against me. And somewhere deep down, I knew I had to be patient, because she was patient, too. Things escalated when she started involving other family members in her little schemes. One weekend, she invited my mother-in-law over without asking, insisting she come to help with the kids. By the time I arrived home, she was already in the kitchen, critiquing the way I had prepared lunch and giving unsolicited tips on table settings. My husband tried to intervene, but she was charming enough that his mother laughed and nodded along. I felt invisible, like my home wasn't really mine anymore. During another incident, she offered to organize our holiday decorations while we were out. I returned to find everything rearranged in a way I didn't recognize, the living room, almost unrecognizable. I confronted her, asking why she assumed she could make these decisions, and she simply replied, "I just thought you'd appreciate the help." Her tone was casual, but the underlying message was clear. She thought she knew better, and she expected compliance. That I tried to communicate my feelings calmly with my husband, explaining how her constant intrusions were affecting me and our family dynamic. But he often brushed it off, saying I was reading too much into it, or that she meant well. It was frustrating to feel unheard, and it made me question whether I was overreacting. But the pattern was undeniable. Every suggestion, every decision she inserted herself into, chipped away at my sense of control and my confidence in managing our own household. One evening, after a particularly tense encounter, I found myself sitting on the stairs, head in my hands, wondering how we had reached this point. It wasn't just about her presence. It was about her ability to subtly dominate our lives without anyone openly confronting her. I realized I had to be strategic, to set firm boundaries without creating a dramatic confrontation that could turn everyone against me. That night, I drafted a plan in my journal, outlining the areas where her interference was most damaging and brainstorming ways to gently reclaim control. I knew it wouldn't be easy. She was patient, calculating, and relentless. But I also knew that our family's well-being depended on me asserting myself, and that meant finding a way to stand firm without causing a complete meltdown. The following week, she started leaving little suggestions in the child's backpack, notes about what to wear, reminders for homework, and even instructions for snacks. At first, I thought it was harmless, but I quickly realized it was a calculated effort to control even the smallest aspects of our daily life. I found myself double-checking everything she touched, feeling tense and frustrated every time I discovered another unsolicited adjustment point one evening. She invited herself to help with dinner, despite knowing I had planned the meal myself. I tried to politely redirect her, but she lingered, offering constant tips and commentary. My husband, again, seemed oblivious, laughing at her jokes and treating her as if she was just being helpful. I felt a mix of anger and despair. How could someone invade our home and influence our family so subtly while appearing completely innocent? By midweek, I had started talking to close friends outside the family, seeking advice on how to handle the situation. They encouraged me to set firm boundaries, to assert control in a calm but decisive manner. I drafted a list of rules for household interactions, times when visits were acceptable, areas of the house that were private, and the way decisions should be communicated. It felt strange to formalize these boundaries, but I knew it was necessary to protect our family's autonomy. That on Friday evening, she showed up again, carrying an array of groceries she thought we might need. I took a deep breath, remembering the rules I had drafted, and explained clearly which items we already had and why it was important to coordinate these things with us. Her face held a faint smile, but I could sense the shift. She realized her influence was being challenged. I felt a small victory, though I knew it was just the beginning. Later that night, I reflected on the week. The constant pressure, the subtle manipulation, and the struggle to reclaim control had been exhausting, but I felt a renewed sense of determination. I wasn't going to let her slowly dominate our home. And while it was going to be a long, difficult journey, I finally felt like I had a plan, one that might restore balance to our family life before it was too late. The next morning, I woke up with a knot in my stomach, anticipating another round of subtle intrusions. True enough, she was already at our front door, holding a stack of papers she claimed were important schedules for our child's activities. I took a deep breath, reminding myself of the boundaries I had set. Calmly, I explained that while we appreciated her effort, all scheduling decisions needed to go through me and my husband first. She tilted her head, giving me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, I just wanted to help," she said, lightly, as if that explained everything. I could feel the tension building, but I forced myself to stay composed. I realized that losing my temper would only give her the upper hand. Instead, I carefully guided her to place the papers on the counter, emphasizing that we would review them together later. Throughout the day, I found myself replaying our conversation, analyzing every word and gesture. The frustration was there, but so was a strange sense of empowerment. I had finally asserted myself, even if only slightly. My husband noticed the change in my demeanor and asked if I was okay. I nodded, though inside I felt both exhausted and resolute. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was necessary. By evening, the household felt quieter, almost serene after the day's tension. I sat down with a cup of tea, reflecting on how far I had come. Even small victories, like maintaining calm during her visit, felt monumental. I made a mental note to continue documenting every interaction, every manipulation, and every small step I took to reclaim our home. That I knew she would push back, but for the first time, I felt ready. Ready to protect our space, our routines, and our family life. The path ahead was long and uncertain, but at least now I had a sense of control, and that, in itself, was a victory. The weekend brought another wave of tension. She had somehow convinced my husband that she should take our child for a few hours to give me a break. At first, I agreed, thinking it would be manageable, but as soon as she left with our child, I felt a pang of anxiety. I kept checking the clock, imagining her giving instructions or criticism while I wasn't there to witness it. When they returned, she walked in with a casual grin, recounting every little decision she had made, what snack she gave, which toy she encouraged, how she handled minor disputes between the kids. My husband nodded along, impressed by her initiative. I listened quietly, my frustration mounting with each sentence. She had turned a simple favor into a subtle display of control that I decided then that passive acceptance wasn't working. I began planning a conversation with my husband about consistent boundaries and the need to enforce them, not just for my sanity, but for our child's stability. Later that night, I drafted bullet points, examples of previous incidents, and strategies for redirecting her interventions without causing a family-wide confrontation. The next day, she showed up again, claiming she wanted to help with a project I had been working on. This time, I didn't flinch. I calmly stated that I preferred to handle the project myself, explaining why it was important for me to manage it directly. Her smile didn't waver, but I could sense a flicker of irritation. I realized that asserting myself wasn't just about controlling our home. It was about maintaining my dignity and teaching my child that boundaries mattered. By evening, the household felt tense but balanced. I had drawn clear lines, and although she would undoubtedly test them, I felt a sense of accomplishment. For the first time in months, I could see the beginnings of change. The path ahead was still uncertain, but with careful planning, patience, and determination, I started to believe that our family could reclaim its space, its rhythm, and its peace. The following week, I noticed subtle changes in her behavior. She started offering advice in more public settings, at school events, playgrounds, and even during casual neighborhood gatherings. It was as if she wanted everyone to see her as the perfect aunt, the caring helper, while I was left feeling sidelined. I caught myself clenching my jaw, suppressing the urge to point out that I was the parent, not her. One afternoon, during a parent-teacher meeting, she began explaining our child's progress to the teacher as if she were in charge. I intervened gently but firmly, reminding the teacher and herself that we handled all communication about academics directly. The teacher looked slightly uncomfortable but nodded, and I felt a mix of relief and empowerment. I realized that small, consistent actions like this were necessary to push back against her subtle domination. Back at home, I spent hours reflecting on the week's events, jotting down notes about patterns of manipulation and thinking strategically about future encounters. I also reached out to a close friend who had dealt with a similar situation, asking for advice and support. Their perspective was invaluable. They reminded me that asserting boundaries wasn't just about conflict. It was about teaching respect and maintaining mental well-being. By Friday, I had started drafting a small calendar with rules and routines, clearly marked. These were simple measures: visit times, areas of the house off-limits, and clear decision-making processes. It felt almost absurd to have to write these things down, but I knew that without them, the pattern of subtle intrusion would continue unchecked. That evening, she showed up again, groceries in hand, and tried to chat about weekend plans. I calmly handed her the calendar, explaining that it outlined our household routines and guidelines. Her eyes flickered with a mix of surprise and mild annoyance, but I held my ground. My husband watched silently, and I realized that for the first time, the dynamic had shifted. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was proactively shaping the environment to protect my family and myself. The weekend arrived, and with it, her usual attempts to insert herself into our plans. She had called earlier, casually suggesting she come over to help organize the house, claiming she wanted to make everything easier for me. I took a deep breath, recalling the boundaries I had set in the previous week. Calmly, I told her that we appreciated her willingness, but the organization was something my husband and I would handle ourselves. She paused, the cheerful tone faltering for just a second before she replied, "Oh, okay. I just thought I could make things smoother." I nodded politely, but inside, I felt a surge of quiet triumph. Each time I maintained composure and enforced the rules, it chipped away at the illusion of control she had tried to maintain over our household. Later, as we prepared dinner, I noticed how much mental energy I had previously spent worrying about her reactions. By setting clear limits, I was reclaiming not just physical space, but emotional stability. My husband commented that he could see the difference in my confidence and the way I handled situations. It felt validating, a reassurance that I wasn't imagining the challenges. I was actually making progress. During bedtime, I reflected on how subtle power plays can go unnoticed until someone consistently asserts boundaries. Her persistence had been exhausting, but I had begun to anticipate her moves, stay composed, and turn moments of potential tension into opportunities to teach my child about respect and personal space. By the end of the day, I felt a sense of accomplishment that was both private and profound. It wasn't about winning against her, but about standing firm, protecting our home, and proving that consistency and calm could triumph over manipulation. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe and plan without anxiety. Gnawing at the edges of every interaction, the following week brought a surprise. She invited herself over again, claiming she wanted to help with a weekend project my child had been excited about. I felt the familiar tension building, but reminded myself of the progress we'd made. I calmly told her that we would handle the project ourselves, thanking her for the offer, but firmly holding to the boundaries we had established. She hesitated, her smile slightly forced, and I could tell she was measuring how far she could push. I maintained eye contact and continued with my tasks, letting silence underscore my resolve. My child looked on, excited to start the project, unaware of the subtle power struggle unfolding in the background. I realized that teaching by example, showing patience, firmness, and calmness, was as important as enforcing rules. Later, during a casual phone call, my husband admitted that he had started noticing patterns in her behavior that he hadn't fully recognized before. He expressed relief that I had taken the lead in setting boundaries, and for the first time, we had a shared strategy for handling future visits. The sense of teamwork was refreshing. It reminded me that change often required both awareness and collaboration. By evening, the household felt calmer. I spent time reflecting on how manipulation often thrives on confusion and indecision. By proactively addressing it, I had shifted the balance. The day ended with laughter from my child and a rare moment of genuine relaxation. It was a small victory, but a meaningful one, a reminder that asserting oneself isn't about conflict, but about protection, clarity, and the long-term well-being of those you care about. The next week brought another subtle test. She called, casually mentioning she had a few great ideas for managing our child's weekend schedule. I listened patiently, taking note of her suggestions, and then calmly stated that we already had a plan in place and would handle it ourselves. There was a brief pause on the line before she replied with a polite, if somewhat strained, "Oh, of course. I just thought I could help." I hung up, feeling a mixture of relief and satisfaction. Each encounter reinforced the importance of consistency. My husband and I spent the evening discussing potential scenarios and how to respond without escalating tension. We realized that her attempts to involve herself weren't just about the project or the schedule. They were about asserting influence and testing our boundaries repeatedly. That night, I reflected on how much mental energy I had previously devoted to worrying about her reactions. Now, I approached interactions with a strategy: observation, calm assertion, and measured responses. It wasn't always easy, and there were moments of doubt, but progress was evident. I began to see the subtle power she held begin to diminish. As my confidence and clarity grew, I also noticed changes in our child. They seemed more comfortable making choices without her input, asking for guidance from me and my husband instead. It was a small but powerful indicator that the boundaries we were setting weren't just protecting us. They were creating a safe and consistent environment for our child to thrive. By the end of the week, I felt a sense of accomplishment that was almost tangible. It wasn't about confrontation or proving superiority. It was about reclaiming control, teaching respect, and fostering an environment where our family could function on our terms. I finally allowed myself a moment of quiet reflection, feeling proud of the progress we had made.